I'm Martin Strange, and this is Punk Rock Picture Show, a history of radical cinema. In 1920, Danish writer, director, and actor Benjamin Christensen set out to do something completely new with the medium of filmmaking. With 2 features under his belt, he decided to combine the disciplines of documentary and historical reenactment with a fantastical, dreamlike story, creating in the process what critics have called the first essay film. The result is Häxan, a multidisciplinary work of art that tracks the history of witchcraft from the Middle Ages through the early 20th century. The story is told in 7 vignettes that each focus on a particular aspect of witchcraft through the ages, from the conception of hell to modern psychoanalysis, while being loosely connected parts of a larger narrative. It is a form that is used widely in media today to varying effect, but one that in the early 1920s, over 100 years ago, was wholly unique and unheard of. Christensen, who was an actor and one-time aspiring opera singer, began directing in the booming Danish film industry with the features Sealed Orders and Blind Justice, but it was his third effort, Häxan, that gave him complete artistic freedom to explore the boundaries of the medium. The film was financed by the Swedish company Svensk Filmindustri and reportedly cost nearly 2 million Swedish kroner, making it the most expensive Scandinavian film ever made up until that point. It was shot, however, in the director's native Denmark over a 2-year period, and found a warm response when it was released in the fall of 1922 in Sweden and Denmark. The rest of the world was less kind to the film, with territories like Germany, France, and the US objecting to its depiction of demons, witches, nudity, and a perceived anti-Christian bent. The film was not shown in these countries for many more years, and after many edits were made. Häxan was the result of the writer-director's years-long study of witchcraft, specifically the Malleus Maleficarum, a 15th century German guide for inquisitors or witch-finders. Christensen was drawn to the idea that witch hunts in the Middle Ages may have stemmed from misunderstandings of mental illness. He initially planned to write the script with the help of historical experts, but this fell through once he discovered that most of the experts he had in mind were against the making of his film. Planned as the first of a trilogy, the subsequent films were not made. According to an early interview, the director's goal was to, quote, throw light on the psychological causes of these witch trials by demonstrating their connections with certain abnormalities of the human psyche, abnormalities which have existed throughout history and still exist in our midst. The way this thesis plays out on screen is fascinating, beginning with a dissertation on the appearances of witches and demons in medieval times by studying the artwork of the time period. Numerous paintings, woodcuts, and statues are shown and examined on screen, as well as a handcrafted, large-scale model of the solar system as it was believed to exist in the Middle Ages. This vignette acts as a sort of prologue to the main story, academic table setting for the genre exercise that follows. Part 2 begins the first of several reenactments concerning superstitions and the devil's influence in the Middle Ages. In a clever bit of casting, the director himself portrays the devil, his tongue constantly flicking and his claws constantly reaching out for a new victim. This section shows us a witch brewing potions in her hut, with one character asking her for a love potion to seduce a monk with, as well as a wildly inventive sequence in which the devil taunts a witch with a bunch of coins that she tries but cannot collect. This is achieved through reverse photography, a still relatively new innovation at the time. The middle sections of the film introduce a new narrative regarding the finding and treatment of suspected witches by the religious figures in charge of such activities. In order to demonstrate the point, Christensen tells us the story of a young man, Jesper the printer, who dies in bed, his family accusing an old beggar woman who has come by for some hospitality. The old woman, a weaver named Maria, is arrested by the clergy and mercilessly tortured until she is forced into confessing involvement in witchcraft. In his naturally inventive way, Christensen then shows us in full detail the wild, unbelievable tale she spins of being seduced by the devil, bearing his beastly children, being smeared with witch's ointment, and taking part in an unholy Sabbath, a debaucherous night of activity ranging from stomping on the cross to kissing the rear end of Satan himself. This all plays out in glorious detail on screen in what is easily the most viscerally thrilling piece of the film, especially considering what they are trying to get away with in the 1920s. It is easy to see this section being the one that never hoped to make it past the Western censors, though by modern-day standards, it appears rather tame and even slightly comical in nature. After more torture, the old woman gives up her comrades, fellow witches, including the women in the house who initially accused her. Anna, the wife of the dead printer, is tricked into a confession by the religious authorities who claim to be bewitched by her and sentenced to burn at the stake. In an extremely chilling turn, the last intertitle on screen in this segment claims that over 8 million men, women, and children were burned as witches, giving credence to the commonly held notion that women were not the only ones accused, nor the only accusers, in this time of mass hysteria. The final two sections of the film are perhaps the most interesting and enlightening. They seek to try and understand how the old superstitions have either evolved or hung around over time. In a moment where the narrative is broken for a bit of meta-commentary, the director speaks to the audience directly, showing one of his actresses trying out one of the small torture devices on her fingers. Suddenly, we are greeted with a contemporary vision in what has up until this point been a period piece. In the following segment, Christensen sets up the actress as multiple characters in a sort of theater workshop style. She portrays a sleepwalker, a pyromaniac, and a kleptomaniac, suggesting that these illnesses may have been falsely interpreted as witchery in medieval times. Accordingly, the director shows the woman being sent to a high-end mental institution of the time, blatantly remarking on how aspects of status and class were used by the superstitious lot of the past as well as modern psychoanalysts. This scene is brilliantly contrasted with a shot of 3 witches burning on the stakes, which closes the film. In his essay, The Real Unreal, writer Chris Fujiwara states, quote, "One of Häxan's masterstrokes is the way it places together, on the same level of cinematic depiction, objective reality and hallucination. It does this with great verve and audacity and with a painstaking eye for detail. Near the start of the film, Christensen establishes a modern, rationalist point of view that he will proceed to undermine for much of the rest of the film." End quote. This is perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the movie. The director is drawing parallels from the Middle Ages to modern times, but is doing so through elaborately constructed, artificial means, which inform how we interpret it. The sincerity and seriousness is felt throughout the piece, from its scholarly introduction to the most beguiling scenes of devil worship, to the rather sympathetic plea of its conclusion. The director treats the heightened genre aspects of his film with as much care and importance as the documentary segments. There is no distinction, because a certain level of unreality is maintained throughout all 7 chapters of the film. Though it is not the first film to depict a witch on screen, Häxan anticipates the decades of popular horror that will come. The term wasn't even widely used to describe the genre until the 1930s, yet Christensen's film, along with Nosferatu the same year, shows us dramatic conceptions of our greatest fears and how they stem from a fundamental misunderstanding. In her essay, Let the Suffering Begin, academic Chloe Germain Buckley describes the film as quasi-feminist and praises the way it shows how the history of witchcraft is related to the oppression of women throughout different historical periods. She writes, quote, "The evil witch stereotype has become such a convenient tool for the propagation of misogynistic ideas, and that the film, quote, suggests an intersection of gender and social class. Witches are not only women, they are poor women," end quote. It is not entirely clear whether Christensen knew his work would be interpreted as progressive as it is, but his passion for the subject matter is masterfully put to screen in fantastical sequences that are extraordinarily choreographed, even by today's standards. The film's use of practical movie magic are one of its greatest highlights, with the director utilizing every possible special effects tool available at the time: superimposition, stop-motion animation, puppetry, and detailed, hyper-specific makeup and prosthetics give the movie a vitality and a level of craft that is mystifying. During these sequences, it is almost easy to forget that the film is rooted in historical accounts. Once the film was finally allowed into the States and other countries, it had been completely recut into a new, shorter, more palatable version. This cut, released over 40 years later in 1968, was done by Metro Pictures Corporation and retitled Witchcraft Through the Ages. Astoundingly, this version includes a jazz score by composer Daniel Humer, with help from avant-garde violinist Jean-Luc Ponty, and features voiceover narration by author William S. Burroughs. While much of the film's original power is lost in this version, it remains a curious artifact of how Western audiences chose to consume the types of media they considered too radical or abrasive at the time. It is presented on both Blu-ray editions of Häxan from the Criterion Collection and Radiance Films. As its awareness and popularity grew over the years, Häxan received multiple restorations by the Swedish Film Institute, in 1976 and 2007 photochemically, and again in 2016 digitally. The film has been given numerous reassessments since its release as the subject of essays, best-of lists, and retrospective reviews. It is widely regarded as Benjamin Christensen's masterpiece, and has been praised for its cross-disciplinary experimentation and commitment to authentic-looking practical effects and innovative camera techniques. Its influence can be felt on everything from modern so-called elevated horror, like Robert Eggers' The Witch, to the low-budget scares of The Blair Witch Project, the team behind that taking their production company name of Häxan Films directly from this movie. Its invention of the essay film concept has inspired countless documentaries, mockumentaries, and the video essay now widely made and dispersed on YouTube. In a very direct way, I owe the existence of this video essay to the existence of Häxan itself. Whether it is through the sympathetic portrait of oppressed women, or the deliciously macabre, devilish situations it depicts, or the studious academic nature of the project, Häxan remains, over 100 years later, a stunning artifact of the artistic process from a visionary who followed his heart, his instincts, his fears, and invented a new art form in the process. This is Punk Rock Picture Show. I'm Martin Strange. Thank you for watching.